Hi, welcome to the seventh step of the Eightfold Path. This step is called Skillful Mindfulness, and in itself is, of course, a very important aspect of Buddhism, since it has its roots in Buddhism. That's where it has come from. And also, it's a household word. You know, many people use the term mindfulness in lots of different ways, that meaning different things, mostly in the form of paying attention. So, skillful mindfulness, noble mindfulness, if you will, this is the seventh area of the Eightfold Path, which is the area of concentration. So we looked at, to do a little review, we looked at the wisdom teachings. These are the areas of skillful understanding and skillful thinking. Skillful understanding is, in essence, the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and the idea, or not a little bit more than an idea, it's also a belief and a way of living, and that is the knowledge behind cause and effect, or what many people call karma. And then skillful thinking is really a way for the Buddha laid out for us to remember who we are as human beings, that we can have this compassion and this loving kindness, you know, for ourselves and for others and for life in general. And also, he said that skillful thinking, a big part of it is renunciation, or what is called letting go. And I have to put out, again, and I do this on occasion, to remind people that these Eastern practices of meditation that we embrace and love so much, many times we're not actually doing them unless we remember this aspect of renunciation. Eastern practices of meditation are always renouncing. They're letting go. They're shedding the layers of the onions in such a way that we're letting go of these layers so that we can find out what's in the core of being, a core of us, a core of life. And the only way we can do that is by letting go of these, well, whatever we feel has to be let go of, these concepts and these beliefs and these ideas that we have to be or become or have something in order to be spiritual. There's all sorts of things that we can let go of that can allow us to benefit more. And it's really our duty as a meditator and somebody that might be, you know, looking at a spiritual path, to understand what it is that we, in a personal way, have to let go of. So that's skillful thinking. And then we got into the aspect of morality. Skillful speech, you know, how to notice whether we're lying or trying to deceive somebody through speech, or using speech in a harmful way. And also skillful action, you know, where we looked at the 5 precepts to refrain from killing and stealing and sexual misconduct, and the refraining from alcohol, or refraining from intoxicants. And also in that is a little bit more about skillful speech. In other words, refrain from lying. And these are not necessarily commandments, but they are a way for us to live a moral life and us to be happier. And the more moral we live in our life, the more morality we have in our life, the better we can meditate and the clearer our mind. And that's really the reason behind this. If we sit in meditation and have difficulty, we should look at it and see if it's because of some immoral activity that we're taking part in or did take part in, or, you know, an inability to renounce, to let go of something. Is it because of our ethics, our morality? And then we looked at skillful livelihood, how do we make our living? You know, we spend 1/3 of our lives working, and are we doing it in such a way that we're benefiting ourselves and benefiting others? Or are we harming ourselves and harming others? And then we got into skillful effort, which was a huge area of the Eightfold Path. We talked about that last week. And we took a look at the 10 fetters and the 5 hindrances, and how we can use them in our practice and in our life to become happier, and actually to have a clearer mind, and how we notice these things when they come up in our meditation. So if you're not very fresh on any of this, please feel free to review these areas and go back to them. And refresh yourself so that you understand, especially if you're going to be quizzed and tested on these things, that you'll want to be able to understand them and know them. And you owe it to yourself to do so, because it's not difficult. We want to know what each aspect of these very important teachings, this path, what it's all about. And so that leads us now into skillful mindfulness, which is, like I said, there's thousands and thousands of books that have been written on mindfulness from a personal standpoint, and I think there's probably millions of people that would agree with me that one of the best books written on mindfulness is by BHANTE GUNARATANA, a book called Mindfulness in Plain English. So if you want to pick up an excellent book about mindfulness and meditation, pick up the book Mindfulness in Plain English. It's about 35 years old now. One of my teachers, BHANTE GUNARATANA, wrote it, and it was one of the books that really put mindfulness on the roadmap. It explains mindfulness to a T. And when we explain mindfulness, when we define it, we can't use one word. The closest that we might be able to come is by using the word awareness, that we are aware of certain aspects. But that's such a singular thing, to be aware of one thing at a time. It's almost like a part of concentration, single-pointed concentration, where we concentrate on a certain point, and we can be aware at a certain point. But mindfulness is broader than that. It's really a non-judgmental awareness of what is arising at any particular moment, without commentary, without decision. And there's different areas that we're going to break down here in a moment that help us understand mindfulness a little bit deeper, a little bit more, get to a little bit more to the core of the meaning behind mindfulness by breaking it into these 4 categories. And these are actually categories that the Buddha used to help separate mindfulness into the areas of mind and body. We look at who we are and who other people are, and we look at their aspect of mind, and then we look at the aspect of body. Like I could say this is my body. I feel that it's just borrowed, but right now I'm borrowing something that is pretty dear to me. I look in the mirror and I see it every day. It changes a little bit every day, as everything does. The way I think about it, changes every day. The way I feel about it, changes every day. But it's still, in essence, something that I'm very familiar with. And we want to, understand that it is definitely, a flowing aspect of impermanence. And then there's the mind, the mind that can have thoughts and investigate things, and it brings about feelings. It's kind of the mind is kind of the connection between the outer world and the senses, and how we react to them, and how they're manipulated by us, and how the aspects of our senses and everything in our world can manipulate our mind as well. And we can watch this whole thing happen. That's the amazing thing about it. One there's different ways to define meditation or mindfulness, and I really suggest that everybody come up with their own definition. I would like to see everybody write out a definition of mindfulness. I do the same thing when people are starting like a meditation kind of program. I have them come up with their own definition of meditation too, because it can be kind of a personal thing, especially when you're adding all these different words to it. For example, here's one of the definitions of mindfulness, again, which originated in Buddhist meditation practices. But mindfulness is the awareness that emerges through paying close attention to the unfolding of experience, moment by moment. It means remaining present with what is, exactly as it is, without trying to avoid it, change it, or disappear into it, with emphasis upon maintaining one's attention in an accepting, non-judgmental way, and in the spirit of unconditional friendliness towards oneself. So each one of these phrases we could tear down, and there's meaning with them. But the idea of presence is, of course, a very fundamental and very crucial part of mindfulness, because when we are in this presence, we could say that we are renouncing and letting go of the past and the future, and we're in this moment right now. And this is the only way that we can actually experience mindfulness, unless we are mindfully thinking of something in the past, or just mindfully thinking of something that happened in the future, which can be done, but it's still done in the present moment, which is the only moment that we have. So this presence is very important to understand and to rest in. And that is why the meditation practice that I talked about earlier is a renunciation, because we want to be able to rest in this presence. And sometimes the only way we can do that is, by letting go of all the aspects of the past and the future. But it means remaining present with what is, exactly as it is, without trying to avoid it, without trying to change it. We're seeing everything just almost like a baby would see things. We're looking and investigating and experiencing things, and there really is no experiencer behind it. The experience is happening just as it is. And if we were a 1 or 2 year old where we encountered something that we knew nothing about, we didn't get any instructions on how to analyze it, we are not able to compare it with something else, we just see it for its bare nakedness, and the shape and the color and the isness of it. That is really mindfulness in its true essence. To see something for what it is, without trying to change it, or without going into it, hiding behind it, or changing it in any way. But we want to, it says, with emphasis upon maintaining one's attention and accepting in a non-judgmental way. And I mentioned that before. We are not to place our judgments upon something, and these are always judgments that we've learned from somebody else, that we've been told about how we should see something, and we should see it in a spiritual unconditional friendliness towards oneself. To have in a complete openness, that's my interpretation of what they're saying about this friendliness, is a complete openness and acceptance of everything as we greet it in the world. This is mindfulness. And the Buddha separated these areas, this area of body and mind, into 4 different aspects. The first one is body, the area of the body. And to be mindful of the body, one thing we can do is take a look at the body right now. Whether our eyes are open or our eyes are closed. Is there any area of the body where we feel uncomfortable? Is there any pain? Is there anything that feels kind of stuck or something? Is there discomfort in the body? And as long as we're doing that and we're in the present moment without judgment, we're being very, very mindful. It's very easy to do. But a part of mindfulness is to remind ourselves to do it. Can we look at the body and find pleasure and pleasantness in it? We use it for pleasure all of the time, whether it's a sexual pleasure or going swimming, taking a shower, playing. We play, with the body in such a way that we can run and we can do sports and we can do yoga and we can do all these different things. It's being mindful of the body, being present and being non-judgmental about it. Even the breath, when we meditate, I always have people go directly to the breath in many cases. I have them go to the breath in such a way that they feel the breath against the body. They might inhale and feel the coolness and exhale and feel the warmth, or they might feel some aspect of the body where they feel the breath the most. This is being mindful of the body, because the breath is the body being the body. We can pay attention to it, and if we're not paying attention to it, it still happens. But that's why the breath can be such a wonderful meditation object, because it's noticing or not noticing. And every good meditation object has that aspect of allowing us to realize somehow when we're noticing it, when we're focused on it, when we're concentrating on it. We can also look at the anatomical parts of the body. Notice how the functions, not only the breathing, but the beating of the heart and all of the organs, including the skin. We can feel the breeze of the wind against our skin, the coolness or the warmth, and also the aspect of even the brain. I'm not talking about the mind so much, but the brain. How we might get a headache, when we get confused or something like this. This is all very much a part of being very mindful. The aspect of the body, the Buddha cleverly, showed us the body, and he talked a great deal about it in the Satipatthana Sutra and the Anapanasati Sutras. These are the mindfulness sutras that he had. And he moved from the body into feelings because it's like there's a connection between the pleasantness of the body and the pleasantness of a feeling that turns into an aspect of the mind. So every time that we see and experience something through our hearing, our smelling, our taste, our touching, and even the thought, these senses have us, they're like tentacles that reach out into the world. And those are actual feelings, but the Buddha made it quite simple. He said, a feeling is not what us Westerners would say is as an emotion, or I feel happy, or I feel sad. No, he said a feeling is either pleasant, unpleasant, and there's neutral aspects of it. So every time we see something, there's a feeling associated with it. We're looking at something pleasant. This camera is pleasant for the most part. Sometimes I see it as non-pleasant when it's not working properly or something like that. Somebody that might walk in, they might see this camera and it might not even register, especially if it's not turned on. Somebody might not register it, and that would be the neutrality of the camera or anything else that we see. Just look around the room. You can see everything that you're seeing. There's a feeling associated with it, and sometimes those feelings aren't firing, they'd be neutral. They're either pleasant or unpleasant. Varying degrees of pleasantness and unpleasantness, but keep it very simple. Pleasant and unpleasant and neutral. If we are sitting down for supper to eat something, we eat something and it's bitter, and if we don't like bitterness, that's unpleasant, and it's registered as unpleasant. We might taste something sweet or something that we like, it's pleasurable. If we're eating and our attention is someplace else, it might be neutral. We might just be eating for the sake of eating and not even paying attention to it, which happens maybe too much for some people. So, and this is true with everything that we hear, everything that we touch, the tactile sensations of the skin. We touch something, is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? And even the thoughts that we have. This is the sixth aspect of the senses that the Buddha said. There's a sixth sense, and it's the thinking, the thoughts. And so if we think of something pleasurable, it's a pleasant feeling. If we think of something unpleasant, it's of course unpleasant. And then there's lots and lots of thoughts that are not even really calculated because there's just so many of them firing. And most of those would be seen as neutral. And so pleasant and unpleasant and neutral, these aspects, once we realize this, there's many, many people that have been waken up by the fact that they understand that we are like a pinball machine, like a ball being drawn to the pleasantness, the magnet in the pinball machine, or repelled by the bumper in a pinball machine, bounced off. I don't want this, I do want that. I don't want this, I do want that. And in many, many ways of looking at that, that's just a human aspect. That's just the way it is. But when we realize that we are being directed and moved fundamentally towards one thing or another by sometimes not even realizing that something is pleasant or something is unpleasant. It's very, very important to realize this in a mindful way, to be mindful of that fact. And this pleasantness and unpleasantness could be found in worldly things. And the Buddha said these are the things that we really have to be careful of. He said that we don't have any choice about the feelings. We connect with something and there's a feeling, a pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling. We do have no choice about that, but we do have a choice about how we process it. And that's where mindfulness comes in. Are we going to let it control us the way that it could be controlled? We see this happening all the time in the advertisement industry. They put out something in there that's pleasurable. I need that, and we go out and buy it. We put it in the closet, and we find it 5 years later thinking, I never did need that. But that's just an example. But the idea of being aware, being mindful of our pleasurable and unpleasurable connections with our senses out in the world is very important. Now there's pleasurable and unpleasurable connections in a non-worldly way as well. And these are the feelings that the Buddha said that we should cultivate. We should work with these and actually experience them in a deep way through the practice of meditation. We close our eyes. We're trying to create this environment where there's very little sounds. Our eyes are closed. We don't see much. We're not smelling much, tasting anything. We're trying to be as comfortable as possible, and we're going deep within. And even when we go in, there's feelings involved in that. And he said those are the feelings that we should cultivate, and that's a part of our meditation practice. So there's worldly feelings and unworldly feelings. And all of it is a big part of being mindful. Now, we have to move on here, but these are, as you can imagine, these are very, very deep subjects that could go on and on. The other area is the mind states, being mindful of the mind or mind states. And these are, indeed, we could look at them as moods and emotions. Concentration itself is a mind state. Joy is a mind state. Love is a mind state. Fear, anger, disgust, almost any word we can come up to describe a mood or emotion could be looked at as a mind state. These mind states are happening all of the time. There's a mind state present at all the time. And one surefire way for us to be mindful, I do this with classes quite a bit, where I'll have everybody describe in one word what mind state they're experiencing at this moment. And try this. What mood or emotion are you experiencing at this moment? And describe it. And while going in and looking at this, you are being mindful. You're using mindfulness to investigate what's happening inside. And it's a very good practice, because this is the practice that we should be doing. We should notice these mind states we have and how these things come up for us. When we are able to identify our own mind states and how they come about, maybe from too many unpleasurable feelings, right? Or maybe a pain in the body. we're using the other aspects of mindfulness to discover our mind states. Whether we can do that or we might not do that. We can just pick a mind state and see it for what it is, and notice that as soon as we identify that mind state, it's changing. And that's one of the keys, to notice the impermanence of the mind states, as well as the impermanence of the feelings, but mind states seem to be more prominent in their changing, because as soon as we identify a depressed mood, it changes its flavor. Sometimes if we go into the depression, we can notice that there's a contraction going on. And what is that? It's the opposite of renunciation. It's the opposite of letting go. And which can also change our mind state. And it goes on and on and on and on. Now, some people are really in tune with the body, and they like to be mindful of the body. Some people are really in tune with feelings, and they use feelings in such a wonderful way that they, as I mentioned, they can actually wake up and understand themselves and other people to a really clear degree. And then some people are really almost, we could say, exclusive to mind states. They understand mind states, and they understand how they're affected by mind states, and how mind states can come up for them, how they can cause them to wake up in the middle of the night and lose sleep, or how they can use mind states to be very, very happy, and how they can activate joyful states and mind states of love, and see these things as they interact with other people and other things. Mind states are a very, very important part of being mindful as well. Now, the fourth area of mindfulness is what is called mind objects. Mind objects are actually like prominent teachings, and we didn't mention insight yet, but insight is a big part of mindfulness. And for example, mind objects could be called dharma or dhamma. These dharmas are teachings. They are a little bit more than teachings, though, because they're the absolute truth, and they can come up to us in the form of insights. So we can be sitting in meditation, and a powerful insight will come up. We notice that it's the absolute truth for us, because it's nothing that we've heard from other people or anything that we've tried to change in any way. It's just something that comes up. And these are the exact same things that the Buddha used in his teachings. The number one insight that he had, the Dharma or the mind object, is that everything is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. And since it's impermanent, how can we find lasting happiness in an unpermanent object out in the world, these worldly objects? We find something out there and we go, that's my happiness. That is what causes happiness for me, and it's never going to change. We'll be let down every time because it's changing, and that happiness that we tie to that will change as well. And then we fall on the other end of that happiness, which could be depression or sadness of some sort. And there's the selfing behind the whole thing. I just said that we find something in an impermanent world that we want to call our happiness, my happiness. And even that alone, that there's an ego or a selfing behind that. This is my happiness. This is my room. These are my clothes. This is my body. And it's changing all the time. And the more we adhere to that selfing in this impermanence, we're going to suffer from that degree. It's as if we feel there's a little miniature us that goes from maybe from this life to a heaven or to a hell, and that is not the case. There's forms of energy that are constantly changing, that are moving on even after this body dies. This body is not really going to die, but it's going to change form. And this basically, it's a bag of fertilizer. We have the nutrients, the nitrogen, and the oxygen, and the H2O, and all these chemicals and elements that make up the human body. But it's changing all the time, and it's nothing that I can own. matter of fact, I can't own anything. Everything is completely borrowed. These words are borrowed. This camera is borrowed. Everything that I have, that I see right now, and I drove into to the Meditation Learning Center in a car that is, I think, I paid cash for it, but yet it's borrowed. Everything is borrowed. And once we realize that, it's freedom. It's not a bummer. It's not, but it's not a downer. It's liberation to understand these things. To think that our happiness can be found out there when we know that the happiness comes from inside is a very important part of mindfulness. And so we have the body, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind states, mindfulness of mind objects, or these insights, or these what we could call dharma, different names for these things. But these are all aspects of mindfulness. Basically, we can go into meditation, and if we just notice what we're paying attention to, and we can kind of categorize it, but we don't have to really label anything. We can notice that as soon as we go into meditation and close our eyes, our attention usually goes right to the body, at least for a while, and then we focus on the breath, and then we notice that our attention leaves. In other words, the mind finds something else more agreeable to linger or to move towards, and it's kind of fooled into the idea that there's pleasure to be found in thinking about the future or the past, and we realize that that is happening when we come back to the present moment, and we realize that that's our true happiness. We can notice our mind states, our feelings in the body when we're meditating or not meditating. We can be mindful all of the time, and that's really the idea. In fact, I generally say that mindfulness is a byproduct of our meditation practice. And the more we meditate, the more we understand and use mindfulness in the world. It has a tendency to stay with us longer. We can meditate and we notice that it's there. We go through the world and it's with us. And then the more we meditate, the more that is evident. So these are the 4 areas of mindfulness. There's a lot more. Again, if you want to read a very powerful book about mindfulness, read the book Mindfulness in Plain English by BHANTE GUNARATANA, or Bhante G as we call him. A wonderful teacher, wonderful author, wonderful person. And I thank you for listening to this. Again, this was step 7 of the Eightfold Path. If you ever have any questions, please email me and let me know. Thank you.